Louis de Rouvroy, Duke of Saint-Simon, styled Duc de Saint-Simon, was a French soldier, diplomat and a noted diarist. He was born in Paris. The family's ducal peerage, granted to his father Claude de Rouvroy, served as both perspective and theme in Saint-Simon's life and writings. Peerage of France. Men of the noblest blood might not be, and in most cases were not, peers in France, derived at least traditionally and imaginatively from the deux pairs of Charlemagne. The peerage of France was supposed to be, literally, the chosen of the noblesse, deemed thereafter to incarnate the French nobility par excellence. The legal preeminence derived from hereditary membership in the Parliament of Paris, the highest of France's judicial and quasi-legislative assemblies. Strictly speaking, a French peerage was granted in favor of a designated fief rather than upon the title holder per se. Had Saint-Simon succeeded in his lifelong ideal and ambition of conversion of France's peers into a great council of the nation, history might have followed a different course. The family's principal seat, where Saint-Simon's memoirs were written, was at Le Fort-Vidame, bought by his father shortly after his elevation to the dukedom. The castle brought with it the ancient entail title Vidame de Chartres, born as a courtesy style by the duke's only son until he was 18, as it had been attributed to an elderly character in the well-known court novel La Princesse de Cleves, published in 1678. Just 3 years after Saint-Simon's birth, his arrival at court as a young man may have been less inconspicuous than otherwise. Life. His father, Claude, the first Duke, was a tall and taciturn man who was keen on hunting. Louis de Saint-Simon was the opposite, garrulous, much shorter, and preferring life indoors. His father had been a favorite hunting companion of Louis XIII. King Louis had appointed his father as master of wolfhounds before granting him a dukedom in 1635 at a relatively young age. He was 68 when Louis was born. Saint-Simon ranked 13th in the order of precedence among France's 18 dukes. His mother, Charlotte de la Aubespine, daughter of François Marquis de Hautouraive by his wife Eleanor de Valois, Marquise de Ruffec, descended from a distinguished family, noble since at least the time of Francis I. She was a formidable woman whose word was law in the family, and became more so in extreme old age. Her son Louis was well educated, largely by her, for whom Louis XIV and Queen Marie-Thérèse stood sponsor. After further tuition from the Jesuits, he joined the Mousquetaires Gris in 1692, serving at the siege of Namur and at the Battle of Neerwinden. Then he embarked upon his life's mission by pronouncing upon the precedence among French peers, much against the orders and interests of François-Henri de Montmorency, Duc de Luxembourg, his victorious general. Saint-Simon fought in a couple more military campaigns, although not under Luxembourg. In 1695 he married Marie-Gabrielle de Durfort, daughter of Guy Aldens, Duc de Lorges, a marshal of France, later serving under the Duke's command. He seems to have regarded her with a respect and affection unusual between husband and wife in the Terror, and she sometimes succeeded in suppressing his pompous ideals. He did not receive further promotion in the army. He resigned his commission in 1702, thereby incurring Louis XIV's displeasure. He kept his position at court but only with difficulty, and then immersed himself in court intrigue at Versailles, tapping a collection of informants, the likes of dukes as well as servants, which later yielded him the benefit of an extraordinary amount of privileged information. Saint-Simon, for his own part, appears to have played only an intermediate role in court life. Having previously served in London, he was nominated as ambassador to Rome in 1705, but the appointment was cancelled before he departed. departed. At last he attached himself to Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, Louis XIV's nephew and the future regent. Though this was hardly likely to ingratiate him with Louis, it at least gave him the status of belonging to a definite party, and it eventually placed him in the position of friend to the acting chief of state. He also allied himself with Louis, Duke of Burgundy, the Dauphin's son and next heir to the French throne. Saint-Simon loathed the bastards, Louis XIV's illegitimate children, and not, apparently, entirely because they were accorded ceremonial precedence above France's peers. The Saint-Simon that is revealed through the memoirs had many enemies, and a hatred reciprocated by many courtiers. However, it should be remembered that these reminiscences were written 30 years after the facts, by a disappointed man, and that Saint-Simon had maintained congenial or at least courteous relations with the majority of his fellow courtiers. The death of Louis XIV seemed to have given Saint-Simon a chance of realizing his hopes. The Duke of Orleans became regent and Saint-Simon was appointed to his regency council, but no steps were taken to carry out his preferred vision of a France ruled by the noble elite, exposing how little real influence he had with the regent. He was somewhat gratified by the degradation of the bastards in 1718 and in 1721. He was appointed ambassador extraordinary to Spain so as to facilitate the marriage of Louis XV and Infanta Mariana Victoria of Spain. Whilst in Spain he did, however, secure a grandiship and, despite having caught smallpox, he was quite satisfied with his efforts there. 2 ducal titles. Saint-Simon was not eager, unlike most other nobility, to acquire profitable functions, and he did not use his influence to repair his finances, which were even further diminished by the extravagance of his embassy. After his return to France he had little to do with public affairs. His own account of the cessation of his intimacy with Orleans and Guillaume Dubois, the latter having never been his friend, is, like his account of some other events of his own life, rather vague and dubious. But there can be little doubt that he was eclipsed, and even expelled from the Château de Meudon by Cardinal Dubois. He survived for more than 30 years, but little is known of the rest of his life. His wife died in 1743, his eldest son a little later. He had other family troubles, and he was loaded with debt. The dukedom in which he took such pride ended with him, and his only granddaughter was childless. He died in Paris on the 2nd of March 1755, having almost entirely outlived his own generation and exhausted his family's wealth, though not its notoriety. A distant relative, Claude Henry de Rouvroy, Comte de Saint-Simon, born 5 years after the Duke's death, is remembered as an intellectual forerunner of socialism. All his possessions, including his writings, were seized by the crown on his death, and it is thought a large part of his memoirs disappeared. Fame as a writer. It can be said that the actual events of Saint-Simon's life, long as it was and exalted as was his position, are neither numerous nor noteworthy, yet he posthumously acquired great literary fame. He was an indefatigable writer, and he began very early to record all the gossip he collected, all his interminable legal disputes over precedents, and a vast mass of unclassified material. Most of his manuscripts were retrieved by the Crown, and it was long before the contents were fully published, partly in the form of notes in the Marquis de Danger's journal, partly in both original and independent memoirs, partly in scattered and multifarious extracts. He had committed to paper an immense amount of material. Saint-Simon's memoirs strike a most realistic note. On the one hand, he is petty, unjust to private enemies and to those who espoused public views contrary to his, as well as being an incessant gossip. Yet he shows a great skill for narrative and for character drawing. He has been compared to Tacitus, and to historians such as Livy. He is at the same time not a writer who can be sampled easily, inasmuch as his most characteristic passages sometimes occur in the midst of long stretches of quite uninteresting diatribe. His vocabulary was extreme and inventive. He is deemed to have first used the word intellectual as a noun, and patriot and publicity are also accredited as being introduced by him in their current usage. A few critical studies of him, especially those of Charles Augustin Sainte-Beuve, are the basis of much that has been written about him. His most famous passages, such as the account of the death of the Dauphin, or of the bed of justice where his enemy, Louis Auguste de Bourbon, Duc du Maine, was degraded, do not give a fair idea of his talent. These are his celebrated pieces, his great engines, as French art slang calls them. Much more noteworthy as well as more frequent of the sudden touches which he gives. The bishops are cuissed as violets, porte sous son manteau toute la faculté km. De Villeroy et al. Sur son Baudrillard. Another politician has a mind a chat facile. In short, the interest of his memoirs is in the novel and adroit use of word and phrase. He had a profound influence on writers like Tolstoy, Barbey Aurevilly, Flaubert, Vaillant-Inclán, Proust, Mujica Lainez, and many others. Family. Saint-Simon married Marie-Gabrielle de Durfort on 8 April 1695, at the Hôtel des Loges in Paris. They had 3 children. Charlotte de Rouvroy married Charles-Louis de Henenlietard d'Alsace, Prince of Chimay. They had no children. Jacques-Louis de Rouvroy, Duke of Ruffec, married, in 1727, Catherine Charlotte Thérèse de Gramont, daughter of the Duke of Gramont, leaving no children. Armand Jean de Rouvroy married Marie-Jean Louise, daughter of Nicolas Prosper Baron d'Angervilliers. They had 1 daughter. His granddaughter Marie-Christine, Mademoiselle de Ruffec, married a son of the Princess Louise Hippolyte of Monaco in 1749, becoming the Countess of Valentinois. Bibliography. Extensive publication of Saint-Simon's memoirs did not proceed until the 1820s. The first and greatest critical edition was produced in the Grand Écrivains de la France series. The most accessible modern editions consist of 9 volumes in the Bibliothèque de l'Épieurie and the 11 volumes in Carrefour du Net edition, prefaced by Didier Hallepay. English-language translations of the memoirs. There are a number of English-language translations of selections of the memoirs. Memoirs on the Reign of Louis XIV and the Regency, abridged by Bale Street, John, London, Chapman, 1857. The Memoirs of the Duke of Saint-Simon on the Reign of Louis XIV and the Regency, 2nd edition. 3 volumes, translated by Bale Street, John, London, Swan, Sunhamshine, Lowry, 1888. Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon on the Times of Louis XIV and the Regency, translated and abridged by Catherine Prescott Wormley, Boston, Hardy, Pratt, 1902. Louis XIV at Versailles, a selection from the Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, translated and edited by Desmond Flower, London, Castle, 1954. The Age of Magnificence, the Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, edited and translated by Sanchi de Gramont aka Ted Morgan, New York, Putnam, 1963. Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, edited by W. H. Lewis, translated by Bale Street, John, London, B. T. Batsford, 1964. Historical Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, Volume 1, 1691-1709. Edited and translated by Lucy Norton, London, Hamish Hamilton, 1967. Historical Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, Volume 2, 1710-1715. Edited and translated by Lucy Norton, London, Hamish Hamilton, 1968. Historical Memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, Volume 3, 1715-1723. Edited and translated by Lucy Norton. London, Hamish Hamilton, 1972. Saint-Simon at Versailles. Edited and translated by Lucy Norton. London, Hamish Hamilton, 1980. Includes selections omitted from the 3 longer volumes, which together include about 40% of the whole work. Studies of the Memoirs Auerbach, Eric, Mimesis, Princeton University Press, 1953. Siorin, Emile Mitchell. Drawn and Quartered. New York, Arcade Publishing, 1998. Leroy Ladurie, Emmanuel. Saint-Simon and the Court of Louis XIV. Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 2001. ISBN 0-226-47320-1. DeLay, Herbert. Saint-Simon Memorialis. Urbana, University of Illinois Press, 1975. Ruiz, Charles. The Intellectual Development of the Duc de Saint-Simon. Princeton University, 1970.